Hello and welcome to Lovely English Stories. Thank you for stopping by. This story is written for intermediate English learners. Ready? Let's get started. B1, B2 English Story. The Class Clown. Richard was a rule breaker. He knew that rules could either be followed or broken. He enjoyed breaking them. He didn't enjoy people telling him what to do. Richard was 8. He was what people might call a naughty little boy. He was cheeky and mischievous. He liked to play football and climb trees and get muddy. What a lot of people didn't know was that Richard had a much quieter side. In the evenings, when his parents tucked him up in bed, he would get out his book and read for hours. He had a head torch, so even after his parents had turned out the light, he would carry on reading his favourite stories. He loved sci-fi and action books, but he also enjoyed Greek mythology. Sometimes, when the weather was bad and he couldn't get outside to play, he would sit in his room and write stories. He never shared them with anyone. He was too embarrassed. He loved to escape to another world. Having this secret hobby felt like a superpower to Richard. Everyone thought he was always up to no good, but really, he was just bored. Richard didn't have any siblings. He was an only child and lived in a lovely house with his mum, dad, and dog, Brian. He often took Brian out to the fields and played catch the ball with him. Richard had lots of friends, and luckily his parents allowed them to stay over. He felt less lonely when his friends came to stay. The only problem was that he couldn't sit up and read and write when they were there. He had a reputation of cheeky chappy to protect. Richard had been getting into a lot of trouble at school lately. He wasn't listening to the teachers. They would send him out into the corridor so he could think about what he'd done. Most of the time, Richard would go for a walk and see what was going on in the library or the sports hall. He had so much energy that the classroom bored him. His parents were called in for a meeting with the head teacher and the class teacher about his behaviour. It's one thing being cheeky. It's another when he is disrupting the class on a daily basis, said the head teacher. They were beginning to get very frustrated with Richard's behaviour. His parents didn't know what to do. He behaved quite well at home. He did his homework, took Brian out for walks, and helped with chores. Sometimes he could be overexcited, but what 8-year-old isn't? They decided to make a note of when Richard was breaking the rules and being naughty, and they noticed a pattern. He always misbehaved on the days when he had maths and when he had to work in groups. Richard hated working in groups. He liked to just get on with things, and he found other people slowed him down. So whenever they had to complete work as a class, he found, without meaning to, that he became cheekier and naughtier until he was eventually thrown out of the classroom. Another thing Richard hated was maths. He found the subject easy, so when people were slow to get answers, he would make cheeky remarks or throw paper aeroplanes across the classroom at them. He wanted to make people laugh. He was the class clown. The sound of hearing people laugh at his jokes and silly behaviour was like music to his ears. Richard's friends always encouraged him to be silly because it made their classes more fun. It didn't make the classes more fun for the staff, that's for sure. After being constantly told off one day at school, Richard went home feeling deflated. He loved to hear people laugh, but he didn't enjoy making his teachers shout at him. He knew he was annoying, but he had so much energy, he didn't know what to do with himself. That night, he started a new book about a boy with superpowers who channeled his anger into running and writing. Richard went to bed thinking about the story, and the next day he decided to try something different at school. At lunch and playtimes, he joined in with playing a football game that was taking place on the school field. It felt great to run around and work off his energy. Normally, he would sit around with his friends, making jokes and being silly. Then, in class, he worked really hard on his handwriting, and he even put his hand up to answer a few questions. The teachers were wary at first because they thought he was going to be silly and answer with jokes, but each time they let him answer, he was right. He went home feeling satisfied. He had still managed to make his classmates laugh, but he hadn't been shouted at by his teachers all day. After he'd taken Brian for a run around the field, he had dinner with his parents and went to bed to continue reading the book about the boy with the superpowers. Richard realized he had superpowers too. His superpower was to make people laugh, but he had to work out how to do that without being silly and distracting all the class. The next day at school, they announced auditions for the end of the year school play. Richard had never acted before, but he decided he would go for it. He took part in an audition and found out the same day that he had been offered the part as the Joker in the story. This suited him perfectly. He would be able to mess around and tell silly jokes, and it was all allowed as it was part of the play. For the following months, Richard tried to keep his behaviour under control. He realised that by working off his energy playing football and other games at lunchtime, and by taking part in the play, he no longer felt the need to show off or make others laugh all the time. He made lots of new friends who he could invite over to his house, so he never really felt lonely anymore. His parents and teachers were so pleased with how he had turned himself around. Little did they know that his inspiration had come from a book about a boy with superpowers. Richard started the school year being the class clown, and by the end of it, he was a high achiever. He realised it felt much nicer to achieve than to be shouted at. Did you enjoy school? Tell us about your experiences in the comments below. We hope you enjoyed this lovely English story. Thank you for stopping by. And don't forget to like, subscribe and share. See you soon.